affliction.
Alex, the good news is also that God has always met his people more with more vitality and more power in their weakness and in their disappointment than in their prosperity and their wealth. Saint Dominic, who founded the Dominican order, in the 13th or 14th century, Dominic went to the Pope to get permission to found this order. And the Pope gave him a tour of what, at that time at least, what the Vatican was at that time. And they're going through the Vatican, and the Pope said, with kind of an offhanded comment to Dominic, he said, well, St. Peter can no longer say, silver and gold have I none. And without missing a beat, St. Dominic went back to the Pope and said, nor can he say, rise up and walk.
Let's talk about the person, Isaiah. What do we know about him?
We don't know a whole lot. All we know is kind of what's told us in the book. He is the most quoted Old Testament prophet in the New Testament.
Chapter 6 is the solution, because God, as he often seems to do, is he picks a guy to be a spokesperson. And this guy has an experience which is almost beyond words, but I'm going to read chapter 6, and then we can talk about it. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord, high and exalted, seated on a throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him were seraphim, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they were flying. And they were calling out to one another, holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. At the sound of their voices, the doorposts and the thresholds shook, and the temple was filled with smoke. Woe to me, I cried, I'm a ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty. Then one of the seraphim flew to me with a live coal in his hand, which he had taken with tongs from the altar. With it, he touched my mouth and said, see, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away and your sin atoned for. I love it that he's in the temple and that he just comes out and says that I saw the Lord. How many people could say, I saw the Lord? And we don't know if he just saw his feet, because when he describes him, he describes the bottom of his robe and filling the entire temple. The temple gets filled with smoke. It's similar things, and God's mercy is scary. It's like, okay, we'll clean your lips, but even the imagery of a hot coal touching your mouth is shocking and scary, but it prepares you.
Anybody who says, I want to see the Lord, it's like, well, think twice about that. You know?
I wonder if his lips actually got burned, and it took a while for his lips.
Well, Jacob's hip got dislocated, so God is not beyond a little bit of physical pain. It would seem. You and I both remember in the vineyard many years ago, John Wimber used to say, "Never follow a leader who doesn't walk with a limp." And the idea, of to really contend with the Lord, I think that's probably worth the price of admission, seeing the Lord.
Well, it's interesting that the Lord visits him after the death of one king, a righteous king. And now it's time for him to talk. And he's talking to Ahaz, who was not such a good guy.
No.
And we have, now we're presented with the beginning of the solution to the woes of Israel. And of course, at that time, they're concerned because there's a group of nations gathering to the north, not the Assyrians now, but his own people, the Ephraim and others, Aram, and they're conspiring to attack Ahaz if Ahaz apparently doesn't join up with them, but it's not looking good. And so God's first word that we're aware of to the prophet is to go talk to this king and to encourage him. And it's in that context that we have Isaiah chapter 7. Verse 10 of chapter 7, again, the Lord spoke to Ahaz, ask the Lord for a sign, whether, and this is Isaiah talking to him, ask the Lord for a sign, whether in the deepest depths or in the highest heights. A pretty open-ended invitation to ask God for something. Ahaz, who was not a godly man, pretends to be godly here. He says, I will not ask, I will not put the Lord to the test. Then Isaiah said, hear now, you house of David, is it not enough for you to try the patience of humans, i.e. me? Will you try the patience of my God also. Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. And here it comes. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and will call him Emmanuel. What does that mean? What's he talking about there?
What we have here is God saying, I'm setting up a way in which you can know that I've promised something. And so Genesis, that we would know as Genesis chapter 3, tells, but it's not Genesis, it's part of the story, tells us that even in the terrible consequences of the fall, that God is going to, through the woman, bear forth a seed, and he's going to crush, the serpent. And so here we have another reference to that same thing, that God is going to, through the seed of a woman, he is going to bring forth someone who is going to crush the enemy. So it's that same theme of God is going to bring forth a child, and that child is going to be the Savior. Mm-hmm. And we will see it multiple times in the Old Testament, ultimately fulfilled, of course, as we see in what we call the New Testament. And so that's what he's saying. He's saying, I've got the same plan that I shared with Adam and Eve. Some people argue about, is the Hebrew word for virgin, is it a young maiden, or is it actually a virgin, a woman who has never had sexual intercourse? Well, that's actually kind of a straw man argument, if you will, because the Hebrew language is a very simplistic language. And so there are multiple meanings on many different words. Hebrew is not nearly as complicated, for example, as English. And Hebrew is nowhere near as complicated as Greek, which is far more complicated than English.
It's an interesting name because nobody that we know of is actually called Emmanuel.
No, God with us. God dwelling among us. Where does that? John chapter 1, around verse 14. And the word became flesh. And as I love Eugene Peterson's paraphrase, the Message, he said, God became flesh and moved into the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
God moved into our neighborhood. Emmanuel, tabernacle. God became part of our community, and that's the promise.